Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions. Micah Nicholes, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. Like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we'll start with where you were born, go all the way up to today, and then we'll talk about all the wonderful things you're working on today and for tomorrow, okay?
Absolutely.
Appreciate you being here, bud.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So where were you born?
Newberg, Oregon.
Okay.
I'm the fourth kid out of seven.
Wow.
So yeah, there was a herd of us. It was always an event when our family showed up anywhere.
Yeah.
Better or worse.
That's cool.
Yep. So yeah, born there, migrated pretty quick to Idaho. After that, we lived in Caldwell, Idaho. Yes, there were a lot of potatoes. Most of the people I went to school with, they're all kind of migrant workers' kids. So a lot of Latinos. That was a beautiful place. I love the area and miss it still. I'm in the Midwest now, which we'll get to later. But yeah, and then kind of bumped around a little bit. My father, we're seven kids, you can imagine. My dad, he was a truck driver. My mom did everything she could to help, but we were poor as dirt, man. We didn't have much. We didn't anything that we got, usually we had to earn ourselves. And it's one of those scenarios where the curse is the blessing.
Yeah.
And so, I just kind of took that mentality wherever I did in life. And not only that, but my siblings too. Most of us are all chronic entrepreneurs because of, the lack that we experienced. And it created a hunger and desire to make more, do more, and get to help other people be a part of that process too.
Yeah, it's amazing how our upbringing affects how we look at things going forward. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. And it's
so
weird.
what was the name of the town in Idaho?
Caldwell.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it used to be just this dusty little town, but now it pretty much is merged with Boise.
Gotcha.
It's like, city, from in that whole kind of Treasure Valley, it's called.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. What I was going to say is, when you're a kid, you don't even know what you're getting poured into you, right? You don't have any filters. Everything is, you just absorb it all. And those are the hardest things to recreate and or get rid of. And so, yeah, it's been a big kind of cornerstone of my life, that mentality.
Did you go to high school in Caldwell?
Nope. No. So just before high school, my dad lost his job. Well, they just closed down this really favorable situation for a truck driver. Most truck drivers are over the road. They travel all 50 states, whatever. But what he did was, it was a turnaround route. So he'd go from Boise up to Lewiston, Idaho, and back. So he was home all the time, which was great. So that got dissolved. And he actually left for about a year for a season because he just needed to work. We needed money. And so he's in Chicago. And eventually they opened up a very similar scenario just outside of Madison, Wisconsin, in Lodi, which is where I went to high school. And so he would drive from there to the Twin Cities and back, which is about 8 hours, and would again get to be home with us and around and present for our childhood. So
that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, went to high school in Lodi, and just to be perfectly honest, I was a total misfit. I look back at my childhood, and there were some amazing things that I got to do, but man, I just didn't have a sense of a wherewithal, and it's too long of a story to explain all of it. But I hated school. I never fit in. I was the square peg, and everyone else was the round hole. And I just ended up begrudgingly barely graduating and being excited to never have to go through any more education again.
Yeah.
And for me, that persisted into young adulthood. Like I just worked odd jobs and traveled, and just kind of got to focus on whatever I found interesting in the moment.
Gotcha.
And again, blessing and a curse, right? I mean, school is important, education is important, the network that you create, and post high school, college, all those things, like highly valuable things that I totally missed out on. But at the same time, like I just basically developed my own grind, what I wanted to do, and I chose to do it with pretty intense ferocity.
Yeah.
And so in that, I wanted to have a family. So I had kids really young. Our first child was born when I was 22.
Wow.
I was married with my wife, Patricia. And then we had 3 more kids, 2 years apart in rapid succession. The last one was crazy. It was so scary. My wife had a placenta previa, where basically that's when the placenta is blocking the door. And so blocking the cervix, and that's dangerous because eventually the cervix kind of has to flex and move. And so she ended up kind of rupturing a blood vessel, and that goes in between the placenta and her, and that's it's pretty dangerous for the mother, but it's really dangerous for the child because they have little blood blues. And we ended up having to get an emergency cesarean. A few weeks in the NEQ. Yeah, it was just it was challenging. It's so hard to be a parent and to have so little control over something you care so much about.
Yeah, it's true.
And so after that, we're like, okay, I think that's enough kids. Let's turn a page here. And so we did. Yeah, I bumped around professionally. I worked in sales. I was doing direct wine importing. I was working for an importer, and basically a salesman within Wisconsin. So I would sell wine. I love French wine, and I got to have a hand in working with the growers, deciding what we were going to import, and all those things. That was a super fun experience. And all the while, I had loved real estate, bought into and this was early on, but about 2010, I bought into a cooperative, but it's basically a nonprofit corporation that holds real estate as as its I'm struggling for a word here.
As an investment.
Well, it's not an investment because it's a living cooperative. It's like, so it's you're intended to live there. So there we go. The assets of the cooperative are the land and the houses. There's 3 individual shares. And so I bought a share, and each one of those shares is attributed to a house.
Okay.
Really cool spot. We're on 110 acres. We have our own little private trout stream that goes through it, and basically a private valley that we live in and love. But I didn't know, we basically took our life savings and we plowed it into this thing. And, I was just young, naive, but there's no great way for us to get it out. So we literally put in everything. And now we have to work with 2 other people who are essentially co-financing this thing with us. And so we still have tons of equity in there. And so I love real estate, and I wanted to start sooner, but I put all of our money into this property and basically couldn't touch it anymore.
And where was this located?
This is just outside of Madison, Wisconsin, a little town called Blue Mounds.
Okay.
So that's where we currently live. I'm still, making our old farmhouse more delightful to live in as we speak. I've got contractors there. Yeah, so that kind of slowed at least my ability, or at least how I thought about getting into real estate. And so after a period longer, 2015 or so, I started buying just rentals. I bought my first fourplex. It was in Mineral Point, Wisconsin, for $52,000.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a great deal.
No
It was this
kidding.
cool stone building. It wasn't ideal for multifamily or a small multifamily, but I mean, it basically grossed about $2,000 a month, and there was really no way to go wrong. So I bought that, and then, gosh, the next month, the same broker who sold me that one, he's like, "Hey, I've got this other one. It's kind of a pocket listing. The guy just really needs to get rid of it." I was like, "Well, look," and it was a fiveplex, and it made about, I don't know, 3,500 a month, and he wanted 90 for it. I was like, "Okay, well, I can do this." And so those were basically my first buys and venture into investment real estate. And so I kind of became my own manager, which if anyone who's managed properties understands, it's not a glorious task. So I, dealing with tenants, like literally one day, this is probably my favorite story of those two buildings. I sold them now, but one of the tenants calls and she says, "Micah, there's a dead dog on the porch." I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" And it's winter time. It's like, "Well, there's a dead dog." I was like, I don't understand. Like, how did a dead dog get there?" She's like, "I think it's the neighbors. She put it in a box and it's just sitting on the porch frozen." And I was like, "Okay." So I called the person up who they thought it was, and she's like, "Oh yeah, that's my dog. He died." I was like, "Okay, well, could you move him?" She's like, "Well, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with him. I can't even figure this out." I'm like, "I'm pretty sure they have services that you something."
Is this a tenant of yours that
Yeah, this was a tenant
doesn't know what to do with the dead dog?
she had no idea. So she did get it off the porch. I am sorry to say that she just put it in the back of her car and drove
Oh,
around town with this dead dog in the back of the car
oh
until
no.
the ground thawed and she could bury it somewhere. That was
Oh
her
no.
resolve. Anyway, so yeah, manage those. That was great. And I ultimately sold those two buildings, basically right during the height of COVID. And I'll back up a little bit to explain why I sold those. During COVID, I don't know if the government thought that the kind of mergers and acquisitions of businesses was going to be a black swan, but they were basically just doling out free money. I mean, they were doling out lots of free money, but specifically, to buy a business. So if you wanted to buy a business and there was something for sale, they'd give you hundreds of thousands of dollars basically for free. You just had to line it all up.
Yeah.
So I'm still sitting back. I've got these properties. I'm doing better than I was. I'm kind of getting a little bit of a leg up in life. I built up tons of equity in the property, and I'm like, man, if I could find a cool business and basically create more free flowing cash flow, I could do more real estate and kind of speed this whole process up. And I was like, they'll basically cover the down payments in short order after I buy it, and there's no downside really. So I spent the better part of 6 months when everyone was locked up during COVID, and I just started vetting companies. I was just looking at their P&L, looking at what they're doing, how, why, and eventually I settled on the company that I now own, which is called US Lead List. And it was a really beautiful integration of what they were doing, what I was already doing, and kind of the strengths that I had, and the little experience I had in the business sector. So I sold those two buildings, the 4-unit and the 5-unit, and I took all of that and I pushed it into this business. And basically, what the business did was, they're really good at lining up. If someone dies and they own real estate, they basically make a national list. At that time, it was every quarter, and they would sell it to real estate investors, agents, brokers, and help people market to this evergreen source of people who are going to sell their home. Be it morbid, but I like really, you come in and you solve a problem. These people need a solution for the scenario. And so yeah, I sold those buildings, bought the business. And the other really cool thing about it was, these guys, they were great dudes. They're like 70, both 70 some years old. And they started this digital business, and they did everything on paper. They took orders on paper. They all of their marketing materials on paper. And I'm just outside looking in, I'm like, man, like, I'm not great at automation, but there's a lot I can do here. And so, over the last, that was 3.5 years ago. Over the last 3.5 years, we've been basically embellishing our data, making the frequency of use, like the cadence in which we generate lists. It's monthly now instead of quarterly, and just making it a much better source and way to market to these folks in this scenario, and all the while creating automations. And so I could just get to have a better lifestyle, get to deliver more, and get to invest more in real estate, because that's for me, that's what I get really excited about when I get up in the morning. And gosh, I'm sure there's some gaping holes in there, but that's pretty close to where I'm at now.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a couple of questions, if it's okay. We're going to go back a little bit.
Absolutely.
So growing up, what was your favorite thing about growing up in Caldwell, Idaho?
Gosh, the summer times, we would always go to this place called Eagle Island. And it was like, it was a county park, but they had a cool water slide. We would go there almost once a week. We'd eat great food, hang out, at the picnic tables. And, as promised, there's a little island in the middle of this lake there. You swim out to the island, go hang out. I think those were my fondest memories I have.
That's cool. That's cool. So growing up, who was the most influential person to you?
Influential person would probably be, let's say my dad. My dad, despite all of his faults, because being a dad now, I recognize it. Like there's many. He's just a great holistic thinker. It wasn't ever about one solution. It was always about, well, there's a million ways you could take this. What do you want? And so he always did a really good job of trying to help me discern what the end result was by asking those internal questions of, what am I really desiring here? What's the purpose of this? Is this actually in line with who you are? And yeah, I'm super grateful for that. Not everyone has a parental voice that is considerate of such things.
I agree with that. In high school, and I know you didn't like high school, but in high school, did you have a favorite subject?
Science. I basically failed everything. Not failed. I barely passed everything, and I couldn't fail science. I always got A's. It was like breathing.
That's cool. So after high school, you mentioned that you kind of bounced around a little bit.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that. So after high school, what sort of jobs did you do for the next few years?
Sure. So let's see. Let's start off the top. I mean, I worked construction. I worked in restaurants. I worked in restaurants a lot of my life. My family in general, the other entrepreneurs that I mentioned, they're basically all somewhere in the food business. My brother owns a coffee roasting company. My sister, they have like an artisan soda company. And growing up, good food was pretty paramount in our family culture. My mom was she's an Italian. She showed love with food, and that was how we learned to feel love. And so restaurants were always fun because I got to integrate with that part of myself that my mom gave to me. And and so yeah, it was a grind. It was fine when I was young, but come 25, 26, I started getting pretty tired of it, especially with young kids rolling around.
So at some point you make the decision that you're going to look for that. Or at some point you make a decision that you're going to buy a fourplex. So you bought the co-op, right?
Mhm.
And it was owner occupied. You made a
Yep.
decision to buy this fourplex. What was it that spurred you to do that, number one? And then number two, what's the most important thing you learned doing it?
Yeah. So my mom was part of a multi-level marketing company. And I know a lot of people are like, oh God. But it ended up, being greatly, basically she got paid whatever, 40 grand residual for, I think she still does, from this multi-level marketing company. And I know that, yeah, there's a lot of shams out there, but this one ended up working out great for her. Anyway, it paid for, my club baseball. It paid for all the necessities that we couldn't afford otherwise.
Yeah.
And so, I ended up at least paying attention to what she would say about it, because the culture there was different. It wasn't like, get a good job, go do this, go do that. It was more like, how can you create a scenario in life that you get all of what you want and you don't have to have the things you don't want.
Right.
And so she brought home, I'm sure you hear this a lot, but Rich Dad Poor Dad. And I read that when I was, I think 18 or 19, somewhere in there. And so I always had those concepts rolling around in the back of my head. And I was just like, once I got into a financial place where I felt like I could afford to do it. And obviously now I know there's a bunch of shortcuts and I didn't have to wait like I did, but it just became a numbers game. It costs this much, it makes this much. What's the downside if multiple tenants leave, and can I afford to sustain it? And with at least those deals that I bought, there was very, very little downside, and plenty of upside. And as far as what I learned most, I think that I don't.
We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.